What would you do if the man who toasted to your love at dinner had already arranged for you to be carried out the back door before the night was over? What if the glass he handed you with a smile wasn't a celebration? It was a trap. And what if the only person in the entire room who tried to save you was a 20-year-old waiter who had absolutely nothing to gain? This is that story. And trust me, you need to hear every single word of it. My name is Aria Vance. And the night my husband tried to destroy me, he did it in a 5-star restaurant, surrounded by candlelight, lobster, and applause. It was a late autumn evening in New York. The kind of night where the cold comes off the river sharp and sudden, like a warning nobody listens to. I was sitting in the VIP room of one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, surrounded by crystal glasses, linen napkins, and people I thought were my family. My husband, Julian, stood up at the head of the table in a perfectly tailored gray suit, hair combed like he was posing for a magazine cover. He raised a glass and looked right at me, his voice warm as honey in summer. "This toast is for my wife," he said. "Without her, I wouldn't be standing here today. She is the most important woman in my life." The whole room erupted in applause. I reached for the glass and I stopped. Not because I was moved, because something about that applause didn't sound like celebration. It sounded like nails being hammered into something that had already been built and was just waiting to be sealed shut. The dinner was supposed to celebrate Lockwood Development winning a $750 million waterfront contract. Lockwood was the company my father, Arthur Vance, had spent his entire life building. After his funeral, I stepped into the role of chairwoman, his only daughter, carrying his name and his legacy. But that evening, sitting in that VIP room, you would have thought Julian had won the whole thing entirely on his own. His mother, Eleanor, sat at the center of the table like she owned it. Purple velvet dress, jade necklace heavy at her throat, wine glass raised toward her side of the family. "When my Julian has a chance to prove himself," she announced, "he is second to none. A company of this size needs a man at the helm." Her words landed on my chest like a stone dropped from a height. Some fires don't start on their own. They burn because someone has been quietly adding fuel for a very long time. Julian's younger brother, Derek, sat across from me flushed and bold with wine. I had personally given him a job in our procurement department after Julian pleaded on his behalf. "Since Julian took direct control of the project division," Derek said, slapping his brother on the back, "Lockwood has finally started looking like a real corporation. Construction sites, materials, partners, you need a man to push through and get things done." I set my glass down. So I suppose in the years before Julian joined management, Lockwood just grew out of the ground on its own? The table went quiet. Derek's face stiffened. "Oh, don't say that. You're still the chairwoman. Who would dare forget you?" The way he said it like he was doing me a favor. Julian's sister, Cassie, was filming everything with her phone. Since I had placed her in the internal communications department, Julian's image had been appearing more and more in company newsletters. Confident, hard-hatted, shaking hands on job sites. My image, meanwhile, had been slowly disappearing, me with my head down signing papers, me looking exhausted in a conference room. Cassie panned her camera across the banquet table. "Julian, look here. I need to post this for the company group. Show everyone who's bringing Lockwood into a new era." The camera lingered on Julian's face. It slid past me like I was a piece of furniture. Near the side door stood Marcus, Julian's cousin, who he had brought in to run internal security. Since Marcus's arrival, the camera in my office had been reported as under maintenance more than I could count. My meetings with Silas, my father's oldest and most trusted friend, kept getting flagged as scheduling conflicts. That evening, watching Marcus take a phone call near the exit, his eyes darting toward me, I started to see the pieces. Julian placed a slice of butter-poached lobster on my plate, his voice tender. "Eat, darling. You've worked so hard. Just enjoy tonight. Let me worry about the company." I looked at him, the man who had held my hand at my father's funeral, and whispered, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." Because of those words, I had stepped back. I had let him join the executive team, given Derek a chance, let Cassie handle communications, allowed Marcus to touch the security systems. I thought trusting family was the decent thing to do. Then a young waiter walked by carrying a side dish. His name tag said Nick Miller. Whether he slipped or stumbled, He sent an entire glass of ice water across my emerald silk gown. The cold soaked through the fabric instantly and I jumped to my feet. Eleanor slammed her hand on the table. Is this a 5-star restaurant or a roadside diner? Derek scowled. Get the manager. This is supposed to be a celebration. Cassie lowered her phone. Marcus turned from the side door. And Julian shot up the fastest. But what sent ice through my veins wasn't the water on my dress. Julian wasn't looking at my wet gown. He wasn't looking at the waiter. He was staring at the carrot orange juice in my hand, the glass still inches from my lips. For just one split second his eyes went sharp and panicked, like something had just gone wrong with a plan he'd been counting on. Nick bowed his head repeatedly. I am so sorry, ma'am. Please let me escort you to the restroom. If the gown is damaged, the restaurant will take full responsibility. Julian stepped forward. I'll take her. I looked at the glass still in my hand. Something in me, call it instinct, call it my father's voice, made me pull back. It's fine, I said. You stay with the guests. Julian froze. I followed Nick out of the VIP room. The hallway was thickly carpeted, the lights casting long shadows on the floor. As soon as we were out of sight of the party, Nick slowed down. The flustered demeanor of an apologetic employee was gone. He leaned close and spoke in a low, trembling voice. Miss Vance, don't go back to that table. I stopped in the middle of the hallway. My hand gripped the cold, wet silk at my stomach. Music from the VIP room drifted faintly through the closed door. But Nick's words were like ice water poured directly over my head. What did you say? Nick swallowed hard. His face was pale, his hands shaking, but his eyes were steady. Don't go back. Pretend you feel ill and find a way to leave immediately. Your husband has arranged everything. I stared at him. He couldn't have been older than 20. He pulled me deeper into a corner near the restrooms, behind a large vase of flowers. Then he took out his phone and played an audio file, volume low so I had to press my ear close. At first, the clatter of dishes, the squeak of a service cart, then a voice I had heard for over a decade at dinner tables and in whispered promises, Julian's voice. Get it done cleanly tonight. Once she drinks it, take her out the side door. The power of attorney and the project transfer documents are all ready. Don't let her come to before it's done. Then a deeper voice, Marcus. I've handled the side door camera. The car is behind the restaurant. But what if she demands an ambulance? Julian's reply. A soft whisper. There will be no ambulance. Family will take her home. Just say my wife felt unwell and didn't want a scene. The recording stopped. The carrot orange juice came back to me in slow motion. Julian raising the glass. His smile. The most important woman in my life. It turned out the most important person could also be the most carefully calculated target. Perhaps that was the moment the entire map of my marriage rearranged itself in one breath. Perhaps some betrayals aren't discovered slowly. They arrive all at once, like a wall you never saw coming. When did you record this? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Yesterday afternoon, Nick said. I was pushing a utility cart past the VIP corridor. I heard your name, then the words power of attorney and side door. I got scared and turned on my recorder. I only got that much before Marcus looked out and I had to move. He looked at his hands. Tonight I spilled that water on purpose. I switched shifts to be in your room. At first I hoped I had misheard. But when I saw your drink brought out separately, from an inner bar on its own tray, not with the others, I knew something was wrong. Why are you helping me? I asked. Nick bit his lip. My mother had heart surgery 2 years ago. She couldn't afford it. A woman from the Lockwood Foundation came to our house and told us the program was approved, signed by you. My mom is alive because of that. Every time she hears the name Lockwood, she clasps her hands together. He looked up, his voice thick. I may not have much, but I'm not so poor that I can watch someone hurt the person who saved my mother, and do nothing. In that hallway, the people who called me wife, daughter-in-law, and sister-in-law were waiting for me to drink a glass of God knows what. And a young stranger with a shaking voice was trying to save my life. I spoke quickly and quietly. Nick, listen to me carefully. Keep this recording. Back it up tonight, email it to yourself, give it to someone you trust. Remember the face of the person who made that drink. Remember the manager's name. Remember who said what, where they were standing and at what time. But do not, under any circumstances, let anyone know you warned me. He nodded. What about you? Can you leave now? I looked toward the VIP room. Inside, Eleanor at the head of the table. Julian, Derek, Cassie, Marcus near the side door. If I disappeared now, they would know the plan was blown. Marcus would never let me simply walk out. Not yet, I said. If I run, they'll come after me immediately. I need them to believe I'm only sick. I told Nick to stand near the door and call a female staff member the moment I said I felt dizzy. Then I adjusted my wet gown, took one slow breath and walked back in. I made my face pale. It wasn't difficult. Cassie raised her phone the moment she saw me. You're back perfect. I'm filming toasts. Eleanor looked me up and down. You were gone that long for a little spill? Sit down. The party's in full swing. Julian stood immediately, putting his hand on my elbow, lighter than it looked. Why is your face so pale? Let's go. I'll take you home. He was already steering me toward the side door. The very door Marcus had been guarding all evening. I let my knees go soft and gripped my stomach. No, I feel really sick. Please call an ambulance. The room went silent. Those words, call an ambulance, landed like a shattered plate. Julian's expression shifted fast. That's not necessary, darling. Low blood pressure. I'll take you home and you'll be fine. I looked him straight in the eye. I need a doctor, not a side door. Julian's face darkened for half a second before he forced a smile. What a strange thing to say. I'm your husband. What's wrong with me taking you home? Eleanor slammed her wine glass on the table. Why are you making a scene? Calling an ambulance for dizziness? People will think this family doesn't know how to care for its own. In the past, whenever she said this family, I would back down. But a little more submission that night and I could have lost everything. I said quietly, Mother, I really am dizzy. I just want a doctor to check on me. Derek smirked. Women who take on too much burn out easily. It's right to hand things over to Julian. Cassie raised her phone again, faking concern. Sit down, let me film this. Remind you to take care of your health later. Nick stepped forward, holding a clean cloth, and positioned himself to block Cassie's camera angle. Ma'am, let me call the staff to assist you. Our policy requires. Cassie frowned. Move aside. I'm filming. My apologies, Nick said, keeping his head bowed. Guest safety comes first. For the first time, I watched a waiter with nothing render Cassie Croft speechless. A staff member in a black suit appeared. Her name tag read Sarah. Nick spoke quickly. Sarah, the guest in the VIP room is feeling unwell. I recommend we escort her to the staff break room. Sarah looked at Julian. Sir, may I take the lady to check on her? If she doesn't improve, we'll call for medical assistance immediately. That won't be necessary, Julian said through a locked smile. I'm her husband. I can take care of her myself. I grabbed Sarah's hand. Please take me. I'm having trouble breathing. Eleanor's breath caught. Cassie lowered her phone. Derek put his glass down so hard the wine sloshed. And Marcus, moving fast from the hallway, swept the room with his eyes. Not the eyes of someone worried about a sick woman. The eyes of someone watching a piece move off the board. My entire family-in-law. Not one of them asked where I was hurting. They only looked at each other the way people look when a plan has just gone sideways. I leaned on Sarah and let her lead me out. Julian followed. I'm coming with you. I stopped. That's not necessary. You should stay and entertain the guests. After all, everyone is here to celebrate your success tonight. That last sentence made Julian's face go white. And if only he had understood in that moment what he had already set into motion, perhaps things might have ended differently. But some men are so focused on taking the wheel, they don't notice the cliff until they're already in the air. In the staff break room, I took a burner phone from a zippered pocket in my bag. I had carried it for months without knowing exactly why. My father had once told me, smart people don't prepare for the worst because they expect it. They prepare because they respect what's at stake. I sent 2 messages. First to Silas. I'm in danger. Julian is planning a takeover. Activate the protection protocol. Second to my attorney Ethan Hayes. As of tonight, I am not signing or authorizing any documents. Any paperwork that surfaces should be considered non-consensual. Through the frosted glass of the break room door, I could see Julian's silhouette pacing in the hallway. Still there. Not calling for help. Not worried about his wife's health. Just waiting. Nick knocked and slipped inside. Miss Vance, there's a silver car at the back entrance near the kitchen. A gentleman is waiting. I put on the black staff jacket Nick handed me. Kept my head down. Walked through the narrow kitchen corridor. Dish soap, cooking oil, the smell of real work. Kitchen staff barely looked up. Near the side entrance, Nick stopped. I can't go any further. They'll get suspicious. I squeezed his hand. Keep your recording safe. Don't tell anyone at the restaurant we spoke. I stepped outside. The cold November air hit my face like a slap. A silver car idled at the curb. The back door opened. Silas was inside. Grayer than I remembered, but his eyes were the same steady dark they had always been. He had worked beside my father since before I was born. Get in, Aria. Those 3 words. I nearly broke right there on the sidewalk. The car pulled away. Through the rear window I could still see the yellow glow of the VIP room. I wondered if Julian had realized I was gone. I wondered if Eleanor was still performing warmth. Your father knew Julian wasn't simple, Silas said, watching me in the rearview mirror. But if I had said too much, I would have only been an outsider trying to break up your home. I sat in the back of that car with 37 missed calls from Julian lighting up my phone and tried to understand something. The man who had held me while I cried at my father's grave had spent the next 2 years methodically building a cage around me. He hadn't tried to steal Lockwood in one night. He had done it slowly, one trusted appointment at a time, one scheduled conflict at a time, one camera under maintenance at a time. Until I was sitting in a chairwoman's seat and couldn't see a single inch past the walls he had built around me. Ethan was waiting at his office. Files already on the desk, recorder already running. Helen Reed arrived less than an hour later, my father's chief accountant for over 20 years. A woman Julian had pushed out of the company 6 months earlier, accused of leaking bid prices. She walked in with a worn brown tote bag and eyes brighter than anything else in the room. I never betrayed your father, Aria, she said. I was just waiting for the day you were ready to look again. Her files told the story in numbers. Steel shipments priced 18% above market rate. Cement contracts split into smaller pieces to dodge board oversight. Equipment leases billed as lump sum packages. All of it flowing back through intermediary companies connected to Derek's college friends. Connected to Eleanor's distant relatives. David Quinn, Lockwood's former head of legal, transferred to a regional branch for refusing to sign Julian's power of attorney documents, laid out the template they had prepared. A document that would have allowed Julian to vote on my behalf, to manage the $750 million project in my name, all predicated on a single clause. In the event the chairwoman is not in a fit state of health. They hadn't needed to tie my hands with rope. One signature while I was unconscious would have done it with the law. Kevin, a former IT technician Silas had quietly kept in his back pocket, confirmed by phone that Marcus had altered the executive floor camera access at least 6 times over 3 months, always on the exact days Silas, Helen, or David had tried to see me. My calendar had been quietly rerouted by the new secretary Julian had recommended. I hadn't been too busy to notice. Someone had built a cage around me using passwords and calendar invites, and my own husband's sweet nothings. Helen looked at me across the table. Aria, he didn't try to steal your chair in one night. He pulled the rug out from under you. Inch by inch. I wiped my eyes and pulled the files closer. Then we get one step ahead. I'm not hiding tomorrow. I'm walking in through the main entrance. Silas looked at me for a long moment. That's right. You are Arthur Vance's daughter. No one takes your father's chair through a side door. The next morning I wore a black pantsuit. My old assistant Leah, who had been quietly moved off the executive floor by Julian's new secretary, brought it to me before dawn. I looked at the green silk gown folded in a paper bag on the chair beside me. If Nick hadn't spilled that water, if I had brought that glass to my lips, I might have woken up with a pen in my hand signing everything away. I stood before the main entrance of the Lockwood building just as the sun started breaking through the mist. Silas on my right, Ethan, Helen, and David behind me. The elderly security guard looked up, blinked, and straightened. Good morning, chairwoman. The conference room on the 12th floor was already full when we arrived. Julian was sitting in my seat. My nameplate, Vance, chairwoman of the board, had been pushed aside. A microphone sat in front of him. A glass of water had been placed and set, ready. He was mid-sentence when I pushed the door open. The room went silent. I walked to the head of the table and moved my nameplate back to where it belonged. Are you practicing for your role as chairman? I asked. While I'm still alive? Julian forced a smile. I was just holding a meeting to stabilize operations. You left so abruptly last night. Everyone was worried. If your health isn't good, you should be resting, not causing a scene. Before we discuss my state of mind, I said, I'd like everyone to hear something. I pressed play on my phone. Julian's voice filled the conference room like a verdict. Get it done cleanly tonight. Once she drinks it, take her out the side door. No one moved. Julian's face went the color of ash. Derek stared at the phone like he'd never seen one before. Cassie's finger hovered over her tablet screen. Marcus, near the door, locked his jaw. An older shareholder slowly removed his glasses. Mr. Croft, is that your voice? Julian laughed weakly. Audio can be edited. I'm her husband. Why would I? I projected the text messages onto the conference room screen. Cassie's. Lockwood can't stay in a woman's hands forever. It's a blessing Julian is taking over. Derek's. If you know what's good for you, just sign. Julian will still let you live in luxury. Marcus's single sentence. It's not too late to come back. You say the recording could be faked, I said. Are the texts from your entire family, sent the night I escaped the restaurant, also faked? The room shifted. Julian tried twice more. Each time the evidence answered before I did. When Cassie played the edited clip of me reprimanding an employee sharp, exhausted, alone in the frame, David played the full video. The room watched the employee admit he had changed the bit proposal without authorization, then watched me handle it calmly and by the book. Half-truths, I told her, can be more toxic than an outright lie. Then Silas stood up. He placed his pen on the table and spoke in the quiet, measured voice of a man who had been waiting for exactly this moment. This meeting needs to pause. Arthur Vance established a chairman's protection clause before his passing. When there are signs that the chief executive's voting rights or shareholding are under threat, we open the special records safe. Julian's head snapped toward him. What safe? I was his son-in-law. I never heard of any safe. Silas looked at him with eyes as steady as deep water. Because that safe wasn't built for his son-in-law. It was built to protect his daughter. The secure records room was at the end of the corridor. 2 frosted glass doors, 1 gray steel door. Inside was an envelope addressed in my father's handwriting. His characteristic rightward slant, still strong and steady. To my daughter Aria Vance. I opened it. If you are reading this in a time of peace, have a laugh at your old man and put it away. But if you are reading this because your authority is under threat, it means my judgment was not wrong. Aria, loving your husband is not wrong. Trusting your husband is not wrong. What is wrong is wanting to be a good wife so badly that you forget you are the guardian of a legacy. Lockwood is not just an asset. It is the livelihood of our employees. The sweat of everyone who followed me since we were poor. Do not let anyone use the word family to make you sign what you are not permitted to concede. If a day comes when you must choose between your in-laws' approval and your own backbone, choose the backbone. A lost reputation can be restored. A broken backbone will leave you crawling for the rest of your life. The conference room was utterly silent when Ethan finished reading it aloud. Even the people who had been whispering a moment before bowed their heads. Julian let out a sharp, bitter laugh. Your father saw me as an outsider from the very start. My father saw clearly, I said. I just took longer to look. The third binder contained Eleanor's voice, recorded on a USB drive my father had left behind. Her own words, stripped of the purple velvet and the family dinner performance. You have to take control of Lockwood. Don't spend your whole life with the reputation of living off your wife's family. Once something belongs to the family, it must become the family's. She's soft-hearted. Just sweet-talk her and tighten your grip slowly. From outside the glass wall, Eleanor pounded when she heard herself. That was a private conversation between a mother and son. I walked to the glass and looked at her. My mother-in-law without her armor. Afraid. Not of doing wrong but of being heard. What followed was methodical and, to anyone watching from the outside, probably cold. Julian was suspended from all executive authority over the $750 million project. Derek's procurement files were sealed. Cassie's tablet was confiscated. Marcus's access cards were revoked. Each signature I made with my father's old fountain pen landed in the silence of the room like a door being locked. Julian stood up. "You can't do this to me." I looked at the man who had called me the most important woman in his life less than 12 hours earlier. "You prepared a drug drink, a side door, and a power of attorney for me. I'm signing a resolution that follows the company's own bylaws. Which of us is doing something wrong?" Julian had no answer. When I walked out of that conference room, sunlight was coming through the large windows of the 12th floor in long, clean lines. I looked back at the chairwoman's seat. For the first time in months, it didn't feel cold. Not because power had warmed it, because I was finally sitting in it with my own backbone. The divorce was filed the following week. When we met in Ethan's office, Julian across a long wooden table, no Eleanor behind him, no Derek chiming in, no Cassie filming. He tried one more time. "I just wanted to prove I was worthy," he said. Everywhere we went, people would say, "That's the husband of the Lockwood chairwoman." I was exhausted. I looked at him for a long time. If you wanted to prove yourself, you could have built something. You chose instead to take something. He signed the settlement with a shaking hand and walked out. On the way home that evening, I stopped at my father's old house. I went into his study, kept exactly as he'd left it, and poured 2 glasses of his favorite scotch. I placed one on his desk. I stood in front of the large oil portrait above the fireplace and spoke like a child coming home from school. "Dad," I held on. "It's not as perfect as you would have wanted. But I held on." Nick stayed at the restaurant for a few more months before going back to school. I didn't offer him a job at Lockwood right away. I didn't want anyone to say I had bought his testimony with a position. I quietly supported his tuition through the Foundation Scholarship Fund. Proper application, receipts, no favors. The day he graduated, he came to my office in a crisp white shirt holding a small bunch of flowers, still as shy as he'd been in that restaurant hallway. "Miss Vance, I just wanted to let you know. My mom is doing well, and I finished my degree. Thank you." I looked at this young man who had deliberately spilled a glass of water on my dress and thought about how strange life is. Someone sits at your table and calls you wife, daughter-in-law, sister-in-law, and waits for you to fall. Someone else stands outside the door with a service tray and reaches out a hand to pull you back from the edge. I told him, "You're thanking the wrong person, Nick. The one who saved someone that night was you." He eventually applied to Lockwood's new compliance department. No special treatment, no reserved seat. He was hired as a junior associate. On the day he signed his contract, his hand trembled, just like it had when he played that recording for me in the hallway. I told him, "The most valuable quality in a compliance officer isn't a fancy degree. It's the courage to stop something wrong, whether the person doing it is wearing a suit or has a big title." He bowed his head. "I'll remember that." Some answers are short, but they land more solid than a long-winded promise. After everything, people asked me if I hated Julian. I thought about it honestly for a long time. There was pain. There was grief for the version of him I had believed in. But if I kept holding on to hate, I would just be letting him control my life from a different distance. I chose to remember just enough not to be a fool again, and to let go of just enough to live in peace. There is nothing wrong with being a wife. Nothing wrong with being patient. Nothing wrong with loving someone fully. But when those duties are used to make you hand over your parents' legacy, to swallow humiliation, to sign your name while the lights are out, that is no longer a duty. That is a cage. And no one, no matter how they smile at you across a dinner table, has the right to put you in one. If someone you trusted handed you a glass tonight and something told you not to drink it, would you listen? Leave a comment below. I read every single one. And if this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Thank you truly for being here with me tonight.